ChapterCast.
When I think about my earliest memories of storytelling and being drawn to the strange, I remember the electricity of a bedtime story gone slightly wrong. How a simple tale could bend into something uncanny. I was the boy who lingered on the shadows under the bed, the one who asked, "But what if the door doesn't lead to the hallway?" before sleep. For me, storytelling was always a way of tilting the world by a few degrees, letting the ordinary reveal its teeth. I realised horror spoke to me differently than other genres. Other stories offered escape. Horror offered recognition. It didn't insist that everything would be okay. It admitted that fear is a language we're all fluent in, and it showed me how to name it. That honesty felt like a hand on my shoulder, guiding me through the dark instead of pretending that the dark wasn't there. My queer identity shaped my connection to horror as I was growing up, but I actually started my reading career in fantasy. I identified most strongly with the other, the mage at the edge of the campfire rather than the knight in the spotlight. Characters like Raistlin in Dragonlance showed me the power and peril of being set apart, brilliant, brittle, marked. Horror took that feeling a step further. It understood otherness before I had the words for it. It mirrored the tension of being seen and being hunted, of passing and transforming. The monster was never just the monster. It was the feeling of walking into a room and sensing every gaze scrape across your skin. Horror let me claim the creature and say, if I'm the thing you fear, then I'm also the thing you can't ignore. That horror lit the spark early. From library shelves with cracked spines, from old VHS covers that promised terrible wonders, and from small, unsettling moments in childhood, a house that creaked like it had a secret, a playground at dusk, a friend's whispered rumour that a mirror could swallow you if you stared too long. Books and films gave me the architecture. Life supplied the drafty corridors. The people around me, at home, at school, with friends, reacted to my love of horror with a mix of curiosity, concern, and complicity. Some thought it was a phase, some thought it was a warning sign, and a precious few leaned in with me and said, "Tell me everything." Those few were my early audience, my conspirators. They helped me understand that loving horror wasn't about courting darkness, it was about being honest with it. When I first started imagining my own worlds, they felt like rooms I could step into. Damp wallpaper, humming lights, the steady drip of a pipe somewhere out of sight. I wanted places that felt tactile enough to leave lint on your clothes. The worlds were always a little off-kilter, an ocean where the tide whispered your name, a city block that rearranged itself when you blinked. The barriers that stopped me from writing were familiar ones. Fear, time, confidence, a kind of unholy braid. Fear that I wasn't good enough, that any words that came out of me wouldn't be good enough. Time that I gave away too freely, and confidence that wandered off whenever I needed it. The blank page wasn't empty, it was crowded with every imagined critic I'd ever met. Carrying ideas without getting them onto the page felt like living with ghosts that wouldn't introduce themselves. I could sense them at the edges of everything, sudden chills, flickering thoughts, but I couldn't bring them into the light. It made me restless and a little haunted by my own potential. There was a point when I thought about giving up on the idea of writing entirely. I told myself I could be a reader, a fan, an enthusiast, but the stories didn't accept that bargain. They kept tapping the glass. Eventually I realised that giving up didn't make the noise stop, it just made me lonelier. What finally allowed the words to start flowing was a change in permission. I stopped waiting to be chosen and chose myself. I lowered the stakes on the first draft, raised the stakes on showing up, and let process be messy. I wrote badly on purpose, then rewrote with care. I trusted that voice is something you discover while using it, not while interrogating it from the shore. The first story that felt like my true voice on the page was Alexander. The idea had been in my head the longest. On the page it sounded like a confession told to a funhouse mirror. The sentences were lean but humming. The images stayed with me after I closed the document. It wasn't perfect, but it was undeniably mine. The rhythm, the ache, the sly smile at the corner of the dread. My relationship with horror evolved once I started writing it myself, and yes, I did become more critical of movies and books, but not in a gotcha way. Writing trained my eye to notice choices, how a scene earns its scare, how a character arc clicks into place, how a line turns the screw. I still love being an audience. I just love it with better questions. When something doesn't work, I'm curious about why. When it does, I feel a kind of craftsman's awe. The critique isn't about being above the work, it's about being inside it, learning how it breathes so I can breathe better on the page. I would say the person who encouraged me most was my drag sister, Lentil Pulse. About a year ago, she was the one who said, "Try writing properly, give it the same commitment you give performance." She's also the backbone of everything you hear and see from me. She engineers my audio, wrangles my social media. She keeps the whole operation breathing. Lentil is a complete rock, equal parts cheerleader and producer, and her belief in me made it feel possible to take myself seriously on the page. It really did.
But bringing to the stage, we have an author, a drag artist, a horror producer, is here to read from her own work. She is the creator of The Martian Olive Tree and Tales from the Algorithm. Can you please give a massive round of applause to Madam Lether?
Okay, so I'm going to read a short story. It's a drabble, which means it's exactly 100 words long. And it's more like a poem, and it's called The Black Road. The future is a black road at night, silent and wet. You cannot see it, you cannot slow, you must run, feet pounding, blind, against the asphalt, breath tearing, lungs burning, every step. Somewhere ahead there is a wall.
Going from blocked to overflowing with stories felt like finally turning on a tap I'd been tightening for years. Relief, exhilaration, and a bit of panic at the flood. I've learned to build channels and trust the current. At last count, I'm sitting on around 30 story ideas, about 10 collections and 7 novels, patiently waiting for my time. I've learned that if I spend one idea, another arrives, breathless and grinning, asking, "What comes next?" And yes, that phrase, "what comes next," will echo in my first novel.
Yeah!
The idea for Tales from the Algorithm actually began with Alexander, which itself was sparked by a comic I read years ago where a vampire hunts a small girl. I kept wondering how to modernise that predation, how it would look now, and online grooming came to mind. Webcams were the hot new thing at the time, and the idea of a monster arriving through a lens felt both intimate and inevitable. I had the concept 25 years ago, and it went nowhere then, but it did plant a seed. I started asking what other technologies could turn dangerous in the wrong hands, or in the wrong place, or at the wrong time. So when I finally sat down to write tales, I realised I'd been collecting warnings. I began with 7 core concepts, little red flags I wanted to sew into stories, to show how easily an engineered mirror can become a mouth. It feels like the right moment to bring the collection to life, because our lives hum with curation. So much of what we see, want, and even fear is mediated by systems we barely notice. We're all negotiating with feeds that decide what rises and what disappears. Now is when I want to ask, in stories, what it costs to be optimised, and what it takes to opt out. This collection belongs to this moment because the tension between convenience and consent has never felt sharper. The themes connecting these stories are intimacy, surveillance, and transformation. Bodies that glitch. Communities that buffer. Love that persists despite the algorithm's insistence on predictability. At the core is a question. If you feed a machine enough of your fear, will it learn to love you back, or only to better frighten you? What I hope readers take away is a feeling that lingers after the last page. Not just dread, but a sharpened tenderness. I want you to feel seen in your contradictions, your curiosity and caution, your need for connection and your need for a lock on the door. If these stories open a window, I hope they also hand you a curtain. Looking back, this collection represents my journey as a writer and as a queer horror creator by tracing the arc from outsider to architect. It gathers the pieces of my obsessions, otherness, performance, chosen family, soft monsters, and wires them together until they blink awake. It's 25 years in the making because it took that long to build the key that fits this particular door. What excites me most about where my writing could go next is the prospect of widening the map. New forms, new hybrids, horror that wears other masks. I want to write across mediums, to make stories you can hold, hear, maybe even walk through. I see myself returning to certain themes and also pushing into new territory. I'll keep circling transformation and visibility, but I'm eager to explore horror in daylight, horror in joy, horror that laughs and still leaves a bruise. Over the next years, I hope to grow as a writer by refining my craft and expanding my patience. I want to listen more carefully to characters, collaborators, readers, and to let silence do some of the storytelling. Revision for me is where the heart starts beating, even though revision is often difficult for me to achieve. The impact I hope my stories have on queer horror and on readers more broadly is an invitation. Come as you are and bring your shadows. I want my work to make room for tenderness within terror, for community within the uncanny, for monsters who get to live. After Tales of the Algorithm, what comes next is a burst of work I'm thrilled about. The next collection is called Rooms in a Broken Mind, 7 novellas, each exploring a single mental disorder and framing a story within that template. They aren't stories about those disorders, so much as stories emblematic of them. The form and feeling of the mind becomes the architecture of the tale. I'm also planning to release a chapbook very soon, a longer short story at its heart, with a couple of shorter pieces tucked in alongside it, very much in the vein of The Martian Olive Tree and other stories. And my first novel, Through the Glass Opaquely, is rapidly reaching boiling point. I expect to bring that to readers sometime in 2026. When I think about the future, what I most want people to know about Madam Lether is that I'm building a house with many rooms. Some are for screaming, some are for kissing, some are for quiet breathing in the dark. If you knock, I'll answer. If you enter, I'll keep the lights low, just enough to see each other clearly.
Question for me is Grandpa. Do you have any advice for queer writers?
Oh, write lots. Lots and lots and lots. And don't be dissuaded when people tell you no. So I've submitted stories to online magazines and never been published in any of them. And so I've moved on to self-publishing. The book, Marginal Entry and Other Stories, we self-published that yesterday. Great fun. Yeah, that will be, I would say, don't get dissuaded when people say no. Because they're not really saying no, they're saying they don't understand your voice. You can find someone that does.